When I think of books that have really changed my life, there are probably three or so that I quote most often. There was a book called The Human Comedy by William Saroyan, written about the 1940s, and I thought that was very touching to me when I was a younger person. I read a book a few years later called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, and I think about that often, 20 years now or so later. It had great metaphors and a great way of describing the circumstances that he found himself in. And then more recently, I really liked a book called The Art of Racing in the Rain by a guy named Garth Stein, which I thought was very interesting reflection on life. Well, one thing is that I do public speaking on a fairly regular basis, and there are things that people have written about or phrases that people have captured over the past many years that are very appropriate to circumstances I find myself in. And so when I can think of some historical reference or a poem or something to share with an audience, I often do that. And it helps me to kind of enliven the things that I'm saying and to relate them to other trends or thoughts that people have had in the past. I think that one of the things we learn with literature is how people lived and expressed themselves through different times and circumstances over the course of their lives. The books that I mentioned as ones that are favorite often reflected times when people were in turmoil, or the world was in turmoil, or they were facing something that was uncomfortable or new. And the books kind of reflected how they dealt with those uncomfortable circumstances. And I think that that's a great thing to learn, how we are and how we respond as people, as human beings in these circumstances is instructive as well as interesting. One of the things I like best about literature courses and studying literature is that it lets you reflect on how people lived and dealt with the serious problems of their times. So I've used this as an important way to help express myself in speeches. I've found it to be very important when dealing with professional colleagues and helping them to express themselves well. And then I teach a course that is kind of musicology and history. And part of what I think is really important to this course is we use the way that people express themselves in the moment that they were living through these difficult times in our society's history, to allow the students of today to get a feel for what it was like to be a person living through those times years ago. So it kind of brings the history alive. And so I think that literature and the study of literature and how people express themselves is critical to being our best selves as human beings.